Welcome to you at home and welcome to our studio audience. This is the Evidence series, and in this programme it's going to be a very challenging topic, but we're going to do our best to tackle it. I'm one of your hosts, Gillian Joseph, and I can tell you tonight we have fantastic music, as always, from Ken Burton and his band. Ken. Thank you very much, Ken. And Dwight Nelson is here. Dwight, our topic tonight, it's the one thing that is certain in life, isn't it?
Yeah. I suppose of everything I do professionally, this one reality engenders the most explosive human emotion. It's death. We all are facing it. And we can kind of muddle around in the bad news, but we've got to move this program tonight to, I like the way our Australian friends put it, no worries. We've got to get to that good news. There is good news. We'll get to it before the program ends.
But in this subject area, there's bound to be pain and uncertainty. But how do we face that without anxiety?
What's the point of death? It robs us of our future. We lose the people we love, or our own lives, and then what? There are some who claim to know what happens when we die. The only thing I know is that dying scares me. It takes everything and leaves us feeling hollow, empty, and full of pain. What's the purpose in it? Where is the meaning in it all? I suppose we should confront death and embrace life. But how do you do that? How do you face death? And how do you live with any purpose in the meantime?
There's no chit-chat way to get into the subject of death. I'm sitting here with my friend Errol. Errol, you've lost 3 precious loved ones in a very short span of time. Your mother, then your wife, and then your grown daughter. How are you coping with those deaths?
Well, it's not easy. My children have been very supportive, so has the pastor of the church and the church members. But there's hardly a night before I switch off my light and I see the pictures of my wife and my daughter that I don't shed tears.
I'm sure.
Likewise in the morning, when I wake up and I look at them and memories come back.
Oh, I mean, it must be terribly difficult.
Well, it is difficult. There are ups and downs.
So how are you surviving?
Well, my faith gives me hope.
Okay.
I have the hope of the resurrection. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. But I know that Christ has promised that he will come again.
We want
and
to.
That I will see them then.
I appreciate your willingness to share out of your pain. And as I said a moment ago with Jillian, we want to move right through this session together, and I hope we end with that no worries kind of hope that you just spoke about. Jillian, we need some music of hope right now, please.
Yeah, a very touching story from Errol there. And the title of our next song is called Yesterday. There's also a very touching story behind that, isn't there, Jermaine?
Yes, this song's about memories of a boy who lost his father, who took his own life, and is trying to offer some words of consolation to his mother and some encouragement.
So, is it a sad song?
It is a sad song, but there's hope. There's hope.
Okay, thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, Yesterday.
Mom, I think of you. Think of how we struggled to get by not so long ago. And yesterday, raising up 3 kids all alone. You made it work somehow. Never called it quits. Yesterday, I will always love you. Think of all the sacrifice you gave. Wasn't very easy. Yesterday, I know you loved him much. You how much you missed his tender touch. Mom, you can't go back to yesterday. Still you wonder why we may never know until that day. Cannot help but cry. Yesterday, we will always love him. Think of all the times he threw away. Hasn't been so long ago, just yesterday.
Say goodbye to yesterday. Let it go away that way. Going out with life today. Giving up what might have been. I will be there every time to help you, mama. Please don't cry.
Hold on.
Say goodbye to yesterday.
Say goodbye.
Let it go away.
Get away the
Going out with
light.
life today. Giving up what might
I
have
will
been.
be right there.
To help you, mama. Please don't cry.
Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry.
Say goodbye to yesterday. Let it go away that way. Going on with life today. Giving up what might have been. I will be there every time to help you, mama. Please don't cry.
Thank you, Jermaine. That was beautiful. Now, when it comes to death, we often don't want to face it. We want to run the other way. But somebody who's done the complete opposite is Sandra Skibsted. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you.
Sandra, you're a crime scene photographer, and so you face death every day, but you decided in your spare time to put on an exhibition called Intimate Death, looking
Yeah.
at what happens after we die. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, the images that I saw were quite abrupt and horrific endings, and I felt I needed a better balance, better perspective of death than what I saw in my job. So that was the main personal reason why I decided to do that.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the photos. Here we've got a couple of undertakers. Now, we often think that that's a strange profession to go in, but you felt otherwise.
Yes, I had a lot of fun with these guys. They're great people. They're just really, they're average people. They're normal.
They're normal.
Obviously, their job is not something that we would even want to think about. But
Sure, it's a difficult job. Let's take a
It
look at
is.
another photo. Now, this is actually inside a morgue, perhaps something
inside
that
the
most
fridge, yeah.
people wouldn't see.
True. This is in a mortuary, shot through the actual fridge where you have the deceased.
This is your office almost, isn't it? You face death every single day.
I spend a lot of time in mortuaries, unfortunately. That's part of my job. it has to be done.
How do you cope with that?
Personally, well, you have to try and detach yourself a bit, and it's not something you say to yourself, now I have to do this. It actually happens quite automatically. I guess when you're faced with that, you sort of have to switch off a bit.
Let's move on to the last photo here. This is very interesting here, somebody being prepared. What's happening here?
Well, I spent quite a few evenings with this lady. She's an embalmer, and once she has finished the embalming procedure, she will also wash the deceased hair, blow dry it, and also shave the men if they need to, and just fix them up.
And why do they do this?
Because the embalming procedure is made for the finality of death, to make it look like a sleep rather, because it's quite hard for us to look at death right in the face.
Okay, Sandra, thank you very much for
That's
that.
right. Thank
Trying
you.
to make us look as if we're sleeping rather than staring death in the face. Well, I guess the question that a lot of us face is there anything after death? Is there life beyond this life here? What's your meaning, understanding of death?
I hate that subject, death. I even hate the word death.
Going to another place.
Yeah, we could do without it.
Death scares me because it's something I don't like to think about. If there's a lot that I want to accomplish, and hopefully I'll be able to do these things before I die. But a lot of people think that death. They believe that reincarnation. Everyone has different religious beliefs. They believe there's life after death, and I don't know. I don't know if I'll. I like to believe that there is, but I don't know.
I'm frightened of death. I kind of like life, so I'm not keen on death. I hope that I hope I live a long life, so that death comes as a developmental part. I hope you get to the place where you feel you've done what you were here to do.
Yeah, it's something that's kind of inevitable, something you can kind of take the hard way or kind of, it's each to their own, I guess.
I don't know, it's bad. It's like the end. Terrible. I mean, I guess it should be a good thing if you believe in, if you're a Protestant or a Christian or a Catholic. But I don't think anybody wants to die because I view it as it's just the end. You're never coming back and it's just over.
It's sad, but it just means that you go to another place. That's what I think. It's sad for the people that's left behind, but for that person, it doesn't mean that it's bad.
I think that heaven is here and now. It's about treating people well and living a good life. And I guess I'm not totally closed off to the idea, but I certainly don't. I guess I don't pursue life with the idea of if I do that, I'll get into heaven. Or I think that life beyond death. Well, yeah. I hope there's something and a bar there.
Somebody wishing there's a bar in the afterlife. Well, the painful reality is, if we haven't already faced death or lost someone that we love, we will at some point in the future. But what about if death faces you, if your life is threatened? Dr. Sheila Cassidy was working in Chile when she ran into danger. This is her story.
Well, in 75, I was working there as a doctor, and I got asked by some priests to treat a guy who was on the run, and I did that. And then the secret police found out, and I was arrested at gunpoint and then tortured for really over one night. And I was in solitary confinement for 3 weeks, and then 5 weeks in a detention camp. I was actually tortured on 3 separate occasions and stripped naked and tied to this metal bunk bed for torture on 4 occasions. And it was very, very scary because the thought of the pain was so terrifying. And I think it must be quite like people who have surgery and things just get more and more painful. You just get absolutely terrified of the pain and terrified of the fear of death. While I was in solitary confinement, I was taken before what they call the procurator fiscal, which is the judge. And he made it very clear to me that I was being accused of having killed the maid, who was actually killed by the military, in the house where I was arrested, and that I might actually be executed. And I spent the whole of the next night really doing a sort of fighting with God and pleading for my life, and eventually managed to hand my life over to God a bit like a blank check. But it was absolutely terrifying. I think that when one is in a sort of hostage situation, as I was in, you just cope with it minute by minute. I mean, I prayed a great deal, I guess begging God to rescue me. But I got the sense of God as a bystander, as a powerless bystander. I think I wanted God to come in on a shining charger and rescue me, but I then realised it wasn't going to be like that. But it was just a matter of surviving minute by minute. And I think that it's a human thing that happens, that, you know, one just is given the power to survive. When I came back from Chile, I spent about 18 months lecturing, and then I spent some time in a monastery and in a convent. But then I ran out of money, and I also decided that I needed to go back into medicine. And by chance, I went into oncology and found that I absolutely loved it, that I was very, very at ease with people who were very frightened, with people who were dying, and that I had an ability to communicate with people in a very direct way. I think that we're all frightened of death. I think even people with a deep faith, I think it's the fact that it's the unknown, it's the fact that it's the fear of annihilation, and I think that's a basic instinct, which a lot of people manage to subdue in the last days and weeks of their life. But most people go through some kind of a battle of acceptance, and the job of people who work in hospices really is to help them to do that, to help them along that journey. I've always said that really since the Chile thing, I've had no small talk. I can't make polite conversation at a cocktail party, but I can talk about living and dying with great comfort and ease. And I think that's what, you know, brought me to it and made me good at it. I think death is an inevitable part of the human existence. I hate it in many ways because I've seen so many young people die. But having said that, for the very elderly, death comes as a friend. And also, perhaps one of the reasons that the cancer death is more peaceful than sudden or violent death is that people become so weak that, in a way, death comes as a friend again. It becomes welcome. But it only comes as a friend when life is no longer really very good. But then it does. It can be very peaceful. I believe most passionately that there is life beyond death. You could say that it suits me. It definitely suits me to believe that. But I do believe it. I don't have any evidence, nor does anybody else. But I suppose my experience of God and my experience of being someone to whom the spiritual life has always been important teaches me that there is life beyond death, and I don't see any point in trying to change that.
What a story. Sheila Cassidy, she looks death in the face and then spends her life helping people confront the inevitable.
Like the fact that she doesn't do chit-chat anymore.
Yeah, just gets down to the basic issues.
Absolutely.
Well, we want to get down to basic issues tonight with another physician, Dr. Andrew Baildam. Great to have you this evening.
Thank you.
Surgical oncologist, Secretary, British Association of Cancer Surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I would love, Andy, to talk about your successes. Reconstructive surgery,
sure.
oncology surgery. But as you know, our theme is death. How do people cope and respond when you walk in and say, we've done everything we can, I'm sorry, there's nothing more?
Initially, there's often anger, disbelief, guilt, fear, and then a working through, almost like a whole process towards acceptance. But sometimes there's humor as well. Someone may say, well, I'm not going to make that trip to Canada next year. Do I get a refund? So the spirit even lifts at that stage. I need that too, because it's not easy to tell people that you've done everything you can.
Yeah. I mean, what do you say to a patient once you've gotten past the "there's nothing more we can do" stage?
Well, usually they're people I've got a relationship with as their surgeon anyway, so I often would have worked on them for some time, maybe even a number of years. So I know these people quite well. As I get more experienced in it, I take it much more informally.
Meaning?
Very personally, I will sit on the bed with them, put my arm around them, or even just touch their hand and say, look, I'm sorry, but there's something I've got to tell you today that you're not going to like. And this is what it is. And stop and ask if they want me to go over things again. But the important thing is always to say to them, look, I can't predict what's going to happen. There is always a little window of hope that's open there.
So you don't take hope away. You don't say
Not
you've
at
got
all.
3 weeks
Not
or
at all.
3 months. Or...
Someone will say, come on, be honest with me, what is it? And I'll say, well, you have only a 10% chance of being alive in 18 months' time. But you can't be 10% alive. You're either 100% alive or you're not.
I like that. That's good.
And I will say that myself and my team will do everything we can to keep them in that 10%. But the reality is that if things don't go that way, we'll do everything that we can to stay close to them and to help them through it.
What are the differences in the way that different kinds of people take the news?
That's interesting. It depends on their relationships and their own faith. And I will say to them, who do you have at home to support you? They know what I mean. I mean, you know, it may sometimes be just a relationship with a pet, but they know what I mean. And I say, what faith do you have? And do you have any support from your church or from your fellow believers? And sometimes that will help them open up a lot. Interestingly, it seems to be the older person without faith and without relationships that stays in denial.
That has the hardest time coping with it.
And I will say, as I see them in the clinic, look, I said to you last time things aren't good and they're now even worse. And they'll say, yeah, but you're really pleased with my progress, aren't you?
Just total denial.
They're creating a lie for me, wanting me to feed back into that lie. Whereas the younger person, particularly the one with responsibilities, maybe with children who are growing up, it seems they work through that and they get that peace and that calmness sometimes easier and quicker. And I find that amazing, the resources that come out.
Andy, I'm alive and I'm not expecting to die tomorrow.
Good.
But you bet it's good. I hope. But what would you tell me? How could I go on living in a way that would prepare me for death?
Celebrate life.
Celebrate
every
life.
minute.
All right.
The intensity, the colors, the tastes, the smells, the warmth of relationships, the love in other human beings traveling the same journey.
That is beautiful advice, absolutely beautiful advice. How do you cope, though? Because it must be telling on you. You're surrounded by this all the time.
I try and take that advice to myself. I work hard and I play hard. I do lots of sports. I have a faith of my own, which I'm active in. I have a wonderful wife, Eileen, and 2 children who are tremendous support to me. And many times in the late hours, Eileen will just absorb everything that's spilling over from me from the day, and that's wonderful.
Because in the end, life or death, relationships remain the key, don't they?
Absolutely.
Right at the core.
Absolutely.
Dr. Andy Baildon, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you.
Dr. Andy Baildon. Good to have you. Thank you for coming.
This next musical item is called Why. We have with us Pamela and Belinda, sisters from Belgrade. Belinda, you wrote this song, didn't you?
Yeah, yes I did.
What's it about?
Well, I, like everybody else, have at one point in time asked myself the question, why? Why is there death in this world? Why is there suffering and pain? And I put these questions into this song as well as the solution, a solution that has worked for me, and I offer it as a possible option to those that will hear my song.
Thank you for sharing that. Ladies and gentlemen, Belinda and Pamela.
Since the ancient days until the
Thank you, Belinda and Pamela. Why? We ask it all the time. Why? Why? Here's a bit of history perhaps you do not know. Did you know that in 1818, a certain Scottish physician named Dr. Hugh learned of some fascinating experiments with the legs of dead frogs? We'll put a frog on the screen. We wanted to get a picture of a dead frog, but we knew that we would be in trouble with the Humane Society, so this is a live frog. Dead frogs, when electricity is hooked up to their legs, he learned, they would twitch and jerk. Perfect, he said, that's what I need to do. I need to do the similar experiment, not with a dead frog, but with a whole person, but dead. And so he arranged for a corpse. Went to the local jail, found a condemned man who was willing to be paid a little money to buy some gin and beer and his final meal of beef. And after the hanging, the corpse was delivered in perfect form except for the broken neck. And there in his laboratory, Dr. Hugh, with his lab assistants and a room full of spectators, began to experiment with electricity. And sure enough, when they wired up the spinal cord and let that electricity flow, the body began to twitch. They wired up the chest, and indeed, it began to expand and contract. They wired up the face, and that corpse was able to go through a whole litany of facial expressions. And I suppose you would too with all that electricity running through you. They finally went to the legs, and indeed, exactly as with the dead frogs, when the electrode was hooked to the leg, it caused it to kick, by the way, knocking down a nearby assistant who was not expecting the kick. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, the corpse had responded in every way Dr. Hugh had hoped for, except one. It did not come back to life. And we chuckle at the crude experiments of a couple centuries ago, but the fact of the matter is, today, we are still in pursuit of the very same quest. Nobody wants to die. Can somebody find a way we can beat death in this race? Have you heard of cryonics? Cryonics, have you heard of it? One of the big sports stories a few months ago in my homeland concerned the body of Ted Williams, one of the great American baseball stars. His kids were in court fighting over the body because one of the kids wanted to preserve the body for a deep freeze. That's what cryonics is. In fact, can we put there are the deep freezes. What cryonics does is it takes the body, reduces it down into that frozen state with the hope that eventually a cure for that deadly disease can be discovered and that individual can actually, literally be brought back to life. That's the hope of cryonics. Now, if you want to try cryonics, you need to be prepared for a rather significant investment, and that is, if you're going to have your entire body, how do they put it here? It's called a body suspension. That will cost $120,000. If you want to go with something a little less expensive, you can have just your head or your brain preserved. That's called neurosuspensions, and that'll only cost you $50,000 and up, I suppose, depending on the size of the head. Either way, head or whole body, cryonics, the whole point of Dr. Hugh's experiments as well, somehow we've got to find a way to beat death. You think about it, ladies and gentlemen, I can't imagine a single human being that in a moment of utter candor does not want to live. You say, oh, Dwight, but what about assisted suicide? Assisted suicide is because the individual has confronted circumstances that simply make life not worth living. Remove those circumstances. I don't know of a single person on this planet that would wish to die. We want to live and live and live. But the fact of the matter is, nobody yet has been able to find the handle on unlocking this reality of death. Health foods, we in the West, all the health fads, gung-ho that we are, we simply cannot forestall the inevitable. In fact, one of our late-night comedians in the States says that whenever he sees someone out jogging for health, out jogging on the sidewalks, he rolls down the window and shouts, "You're going to die anyway." And of course, he's right. You're going to die anyway. The fact of the matter is tonight, we are all dying already. Did you know that? They have discovered that the moment we begin living, our cells begin the process of being depleted with water. In fact, do you know that every 24 hours you lose, unrecoverable, you lose 50,000 brain cells. Every single day. It's no wonder we're forgetting. In fact, what do they call that thing that condition where you forget? I can't remember the name of that condition, but you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We are slowly evaporating away. It's the law of entropy, the thermodynamics. It's just we're eventually all going to waste away one day. A Dutchman named Midas Dekkers has reminded us that, in fact, if you dust your house, and I don't know how often you dust your house, but if you will go home and simply run your finger on the top of that piano and look at the dust, you are in that dust. Let me put Decker's words. This is true. Decker's words on the screen here. More than 50% of the finest household dust is made up of flakes of skin. If you think you're losing yourself, just look on the top of the cupboard, run your finger across it, and you'll be standing face to face with the state in which you'll find yourself in only a few decades' time. One slap of your hand on the bed mattress, and you'll be flurrying in the air. Isn't that something? What's up with that? Cell by cell, dust by dust. We have already begun dying. In fact, would you do this right now? Would you turn to the person seated beside you and shake her hand and say, "I'm glad to know I'm not the only one dying tonight." Would you do that? Just shake that hand and thank them that you are not the only one. Yeah, we're all going. Well, at least we're able to bring a smile to such a rather morose subject. The fact of the matter is, in the interview tonight, in the interview with Errol a few moments ago on the front cafe table, I'm telling you what, it's pretty hard to smile through a subject as somber as death. And that's why you and I tend to busy ourselves. Some are suggesting we are absolutely, frantically trying to avoid a recognition of the inevitable. Let's put his words on the screen, T.S. Eliot. As he put it, we are distracted from distraction by distraction. We're all going to be dead. We know we're going to die. But doesn't it seem a bit unreasonable? Doesn't it seem a bit illogical that we wish to not be preoccupied with what is inevitably coming to us and instead focus on what is such a short span of time? Ladies and gentlemen, you think about it, we're going to spend more time in the ground beneath than the ground above. Isn't that true? More time below than above. And yet we refuse to confront the impending reality, and that is, I am going to die. Given enough time, I will die. Tolstoy. Can I put him on the screen? Gave some very deep thought to death. But what a bleak and pessimistic conclusion. These are Tolstoy's words, Leo Tolstoy. Once a man has realized that death is the end of everything, there is nothing worse than life either. You lose when you die, you lose when you live. Is that all we get left with? Well, obviously, if you live to be 60, or you live to be 70, or you live to be 80, if everything's going to disintegrate in the end, and there is that scientific worldview that suggests that's all that we have to look forward to, obviously, who wants to be preoccupied with finally saying goodbye to everything in life? And so we forestall it. You know, it really doesn't make sense, though, this refusal of our Western mind to contemplate our own demise. We go to our philosophers, we go to our scientists, and you know what? Bright minds, but every single one of them, that I've read anyway, who have tackled the hard questions of life, ultimately, they come up short. They cannot solve the enigma or the riddle of death. Bright and articulate atheists, secular thinkers, no matter how eloquent and logical they are, when they come to finis, as the French put it, when they come to the end, they simply do not know what next to say. But I tell you what, my friends, any philosophy, can I put this on the screen? Any philosophy, any belief system that doesn't answer the fundamental question of death does not answer the fundamental question of life. You've got to deal with death if you want to live life to its very fullest, as our oncologist said just a moment ago. I've had the, can I put it this way, sacred honor of standing behind the sterile curtain of an ICU, intensive care unit. I've stood there with a wife and her 3 children. The man lying on that bed is a friend of mine. The wife's invited me to be present. You see, the family has wrestled over what they should do. And they've made the decision because the doctors have said, there's nothing more we can do. He's being kept alive. I've stood there with the family as that white-clad medical technologist slips in and steps over to where a bank of switches is. And I've watched him switch, 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 turning off the life support. At that moment, as the family bursts into tears, the most brilliant philosopher, the most erudite scientist in the world, dear sir, dear madam, what will you now offer with your worldview to this grieving family? What do we say? It's inevitable. I have watched death steal over a warm human form. What's the meaning of life in the face of death? Well, if you have the standard scientific model, well, someday they're going to throw the switch, not on life support, but for the whole universe. Finis, for everything. That's that worldview. On the other hand, and I need to tell you that I believe there is an on the other hand. And the reason I believe in this on the other hand is because this one simply suggests that a man named Jesus of Nazareth once upon a time did confront human death. And in that confrontation, found a way through human death. I want to take a moment and unpack that for you. There's something else beyond death, and it's that inner, that numinous question that the human race lives with that I want to pursue for the few moments we have left together. Karen and I had the privilege of being here in England once on Easter weekend. Coventry Cathedral, one of your beautiful, rather contemporary cathedrals, isn't it? We watched as they went through the celebration of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. You know that Christians believe that Jesus died and that within 3 days he rose again. I want to go to that resurrection theme for just a moment. C.S. Lewis. Are you acquainted with C.S. Lewis? Of course, one of the greatest Christian apologists of the 20th century. Before he became a believer, as it were, in Jesus Christ, he was visiting with an atheist scholar friend of his, and they were chatting together when all of a sudden, in the midst of their conversation, this friend, this colleague of his says, well, you know, old chap, there really is an incredible amount of historical evidence to back up the resurrection of Jesus Christ 3 days after his death. And with that, he just dropped the subject. Just went on his merry old way, having stated that one affirmation, and switched to, maybe it was the latest cricket match scores. It was just gone. I mean, that would be like you and me sitting down for a supper conversation, and I said, and I say, listen, you know, today, I couldn't believe I saw 3 little aliens come out of that UFO, and would you pass me the salt, please? I mean, what's up with that? Just no conversation. The guy just went on. But C.S. Lewis, this atheist himself, began to ponder, well, wait a minute. If my colleague's observations are true, if someone indeed raised from the dead after 3 days, wouldn't that be an utterly incredible event? And if in fact it did take place, wouldn't there be some rather mind-blowing implications? This brilliant mind, teaching at Oxford University, begins to rehearse and return to that suggestion. Wait a minute, if somebody was living 2,000 years ago and then after 3 days rose back to life, maybe there is a whole nother worldview than the one I've considered. You have to think about it. You would have to agree in thinking about it as well, that if a resurrection did take place, it would certainly be without or outside the parameters of natural law and science, wouldn't it? But of course, science cannot reproduce a resurrection. They've tried. It's humanly impossible. If it took place, we might even use the word miracle, wouldn't we? Because we can't explain it. Yeah. Say, oh, well, boy, don't get into that miracle business. Well, let's just, hold on. Let's talk about William Shakespeare, the greatest literary gift of the English to human civilization, William Shakespeare. You know, he wrote a play. What was the name of the play? The Tempest. Let's take The Tempest. Are you Shakespeareans here? You're not? Well, good. Then you won't know if I'm telling you the truth or not. Let's take The Tempest, which is about a band of people on an enchanted isle where a duke called Prospero wields magic powers over the elements. And there are others in the play. There is Ariel, a sprite, and Caliban, and various spirits among other people. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you suppose that William Shakespeare believed the characters as presented in his play were real? Did he believe it? Well, it's possible, I suppose. It's like some of his histories, it might have been based on real-life people he was imagining, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, did Shakespeare believe that what he had written was, in fact, an accurate reflection of reality? That there are sprites, and that there are spirits such as Juno and Ceres and Iris, and these are all real, and those miracles and illusions that took place were actual events. Do you believe Shakespeare believed that? Come on, ladies and gentlemen, give me an answer. No, of course not. Of course not. He didn't believe it. And yet, if he did, and was trying to assert that to you, you'd say he spent too much time down at the Globe. He needs to take a little bit of R&R back at Stratford. He's been too long in that playwriting business. Of course he didn't believe it. But suppose he was so sure that they were real, that he was willing to risk his life, his career, and everything in defense of the Tempest. What then? We'd say, well, the man has gone loony. It can't be true. But if he were willing to lose his family and his job and his status in society over that, well, he may be loony, but obviously he believes it very deeply, doesn't he? Now I want you to hold that Shakespeare moment, and let me introduce now 4 individuals who wrote personal accounts of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Their names, Matthew, Mark, we put them on the screen here, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All of them declared that they witnessed Jesus resurrected from the dead. And each one bore the testimony that, in fact, he was raised from the dead. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if one person had made that assertion, you can dismiss it. It's just one guy, please. But you have 4 here. All 4 testimonies corroborated. Now, what are we going to do with these 4? I suppose we could say, in fact, it's clear that these 4 lied. They made the stories up. They just were trying to concoct a pleasant ending to rather a bit of terrible heartache, and so they came up with these 4 stories. All right, so let's assume they lied. Why would they lie? Well, maybe they wanted riches. They thought if they could tell the story, it would make them rich. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter is that all 4 were dirt poor, were paupers, lost everything in the world, so to speak, because of society's reaction against their claim that, in fact, Jesus Christ was raised from the dead. So they didn't do it for riches. Did they do it for glory? If they did it for glory, they certainly missed the boat on that one because society turned on them. And in fact, 10 of the 12 followers of Christ who testified, Judas, you remember, hung himself. 10 of the 12 died violent deaths because they asserted that this Jesus of Nazareth was raised. So why would they do it? 1 we can understand, but 4 in perfect concordance. Why would they do it? Why would anybody make up a story such as the resurrection of Christ? And when you think about making it up, you think, well, maybe, when they realized that it didn't turn out quite the way they had expected, they changed the game plan. They said, well, actually, he rose. But I want to remind you that all four accounts were written from 30, 40, 50, and even 60 years after the death of Christ and resurrection. So there has been plenty of time to go by. You can't pull the story back in now. It's already gone. And yet 30, 40, 50 years later, they write with precision their conviction that they witnessed, in fact, the living, the resurrected Jesus of Nazareth. So what's going on here? You have to come to the conclusion, as a thinking person reading the document, I'm not asking you to believe, but you have to come to the conclusion that these four believed that, in fact, the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth indeed did happen. And because they believed, I'm willing to place my faith in that same story. You say, oh, come on, can you prove it to me? I can't. No. Even this, what I've just shared with you, doesn't prove the resurrection. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, if I put this little equation on the screen, 2 + 2 = 4, do you know what? Neither you nor I can prove the truth of that equation. We simply can't prove it. You can tell me about it, but we can't prove it. And by the way, because I believe in the resurrection of this Jesus of Nazareth, I also believe in eternal life. And in fact, what would be the point of eternal life if the resurrection weren't true? Let me go to a movie. I predict you've never seen this one. The title of the movie is The Body, with Antonio Banderas. Supposedly in this movie, an actual bone of Christ was found in a Palestinian shopkeeper's backyard in Jerusalem. And so, aha, see now, this is proof that Jesus of Nazareth was never resurrected. Well, the Pope decides to send a priest to investigate this unusual discovery, and the priest in his investigation comes across in one scene an Israeli woman who is an archaeologist, and she says to the priest, say, what's the big deal? So he wasn't resurrected. Didn't he start a great world religion? Aren't you happy with that? And the priest looks back into her face, and he says to her, nope. Unless Jesus was resurrected, all my faith and the faith of millions of others has come to nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, I agree with that priest. If Jesus of Nazareth has not resurrected, there is no point in anybody embracing the tenets of Christianity. That's true. Jesus gave some great moral teachings. And part of my belief system would say, yeah, I want to follow those moral teachings. But if Jesus of Nazareth did not resurrect from the dead, forget it. The priest was right. 4 eyewitnesses and 2,000 years of history. And I realize that there's some of you who are still saying, yeah, come on, resurrection. I mean, this is like a B movie, the night of the living dead, or something like that. I know that. And that's understandable. Because you know what? We've never seen a resurrection before. Have you? I haven't. But then I remind you, 100 years ago, they had never seen a man walking on the moon. So let's just get this straight. Even though you haven't seen something and can't imagine something ever happening, doesn't mean the something cannot someday happen. Right? So we're not going to use that little argument, well, I never seen it. Forget it. In fact, in closing here, let me give you something to brood on for a moment. And you can do with this whatever you wish, all right? How many galaxies, put it on the screen please, how many galaxies are there in this universe? Do you know what the number? Let's see the number, please. The number of galaxies, there are 100 billion galaxies in this universe. And do you know how many stars are in each galaxy? 10 to the 9th stars. Okay, so do the arithmetic now. That means we have 100 billion trillion stars in this universe. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they had to get there somehow. There are 2 worldviews. The worldview I have chosen to embrace suggests that there is a master designer who has put all 100 billion trillion suns in place. And if that worldview is true, then can you understand it would not be beyond his power to also, couldn't he, raise a dead person back to life? brood on that for a moment. For me, the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ answers these questions. And because of it, my life, I've got to tell you, my life has found peace, hope, and meaning. Contrary to Bertrand Russell's declaration that we live in a universe in ruins. The death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ tell me, no, 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 this universe is not in ruins. This universe lives with purpose and meaning. And there is a God who will have the last word. I want to end where I went a moment ago, and that's back behind the sterile curtain. I saw something I have never seen before in my life. You won't believe this, but trust me, I saw it. So here's the wife. In fact, she called me back to the hospital with her 3 children. We've made the decision. We're going to pull the plug, and we're going to let Norm die. The doctor said there's nothing, or there's just a machine keeping him alive. So I'm in that little intensive care unit with the family. As I mentioned, that little medical technologist comes in and switch. And I'm watching as that chest for a moment goes on breathing and then slowly begins to exhale for the last time. Now, this is what you're not going to believe. But with tears streaming down their cheeks, this now widow and her 3 children hold hands around the bed of my friend. And get this is true. They begin to sing. You know what they're singing? They're singing of their faith in Jesus of Nazareth. Their belief that one day they are going to see Daddy again. One day, because of Jesus Christ, she is going to see her husband again. They sang because they believed. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't make decisions for you, and you don't make decisions for me, but this much I must tell you, that with that belief that suggests the scars one day are going to be gone, and no more pain, no more morticians, no more death, I tell you what, there is no reason why you couldn't live with absolute hope and confidence and an inner joy and peace. Step into that sterile ICU room. Let science and academia step in, and they will not be able to stand with unbowed heads in the presence of such faith and such hope. That's what I believe. Think about it.
Well, there's no doubt it's been a very difficult topic to broach, but we do hope that you think it's been worthwhile. If you'd like to discuss it further or raise any other points, then please feel free to get in touch. You can contact us via our email, or you can visit our website, or you can give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Dwight.
Could it be there's a no-worries truth about death? A truth that ends in life when you begin with God. Think about it, and then join us again next time for more of The Evidence.
Bye for now.